now to take it further from me.
Thank you, Jeevan. Thank you so much. Thank you to you and Sania for inviting all of us for this event. And looking forward to a wonderful and engaging discussion with all our esteemed panelists. And so basically, probably I think it would be a good way to start that maybe 30 seconds or kind of introduction, because many of us might be known to some of us in the audience, but not necessarily that all of us. So let me just quickly introduce myself. As Jeevan, you mentioned that I work for Ernst & Young, EY, and I lead the digital and fintech practice. I'm based in Mumbai and have been in the industry working with all the clients for almost 2 decades plus. Let me invite Anil to give a quick introduction.
Hey, my name is Anil. So I'm primarily coming from investment bank background. I work with RBS, Barclays, Deutsche Bank. Right now, I'm leading the technology division of Audi Salary. As a company, I think we have done so far 1.7 million loans, and this is a 5-year-old company. We have multiple business lines, short-term loan to long-term loan. Then we have a virtual card, and then we also have buy on EMI products. Yeah.
Sure, Shrivas.
Yeah, hi, I'm Shrivas Vadarajan, Chief Operating Officer from Money. Got around about 20 plus years of experience across BFSI, telecom, and airline subdivision. Looking forward for a very fruitful interactions with you.
Great. Avik?
Hi, my name is Avik. I have been in the banking and the financial sector for around 12 years. Have worked across all the spectrum of banking. Currently lead digital lending for one of the largest banks in India. And also I look after various different, I do, on my free time, I go ahead and go to colleges, teach, and engage in the fintech innovation space here. So looking forward to a great conversation.
Great. Yashoraj, from you.
Hi, so I'm Yashraj. I am the CTO at Cashy. We are a short-term financial services platform catering to over 14 million customers as of at this point of time across a suite of different credit-oriented products. My background has primarily been associated with artificial intelligence and machine learning in finance, and then expanded to the broader tech stack at Cashy. So really looking forward to this discussion.
Great. So I think the panel is, as all of us can see, that it's variety of experiences and the organizations being represented. So we have, rural fintech kind of game, which is Spice Money is focusing on. We have basically Cashy focusing on social quotient kind of stuff and very differentiated. And then we have Avi playing the role, in the bigger players. And then we also have Anil talking about early salary, which is the large volume, quick, maybe small to medium ticket size loans to clients. And so I think with this, and we have Primanshu also. Primanshu, welcome to the panel. Primanshu, would you be able to switch on your video, please?
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Primanshu. You could switch on the video, please.
Hey, hi. Hey, sorry guys, I had some IT issues. I couldn't connect earlier. Sorry about that. Yeah.
No problem, Primanshu. So you're just in time. And so probably a quick intro from you, 30 seconds about yourself and about the work you're doing in Paytm.
Yeah, cool. So roughly been working for about 18 years now. First 7-8 years of my life, I was an FMCG guy. I used to work for ITCs and I used to head, marketing for J&J. Post that, I started working in a tech startup called Webroot Technology. Some of you could know it's known as SMS Gupshup now. For about a year and a half, I've done 2 ventures of my own. One was a social network around school children, and then a baby portal called A to Z Baby. In my last stint, I was the CEO of an insurtech company called CoverFox, and currently I'm the CEO of Paytm Insurance for the last 8 to 10 months. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I think quite a lot in, such a short, I wouldn't say short time, but yeah, reasonably, great. I think fantastic diversified experience. So we'll jump into the topic now. So as, all of us know that we are talking about basically about hyper personalization. And I think that's become a top topic of the day because one side is consumers who are basically looking forward to engage with service providers of different industries and especially financial services. But also on the other side, they have a little bit of a sort of a challenge that there is most of the time the engagements are happening when it's not the most preferred topic of engagement, time of engagement, and the kind of channel being used for the engagement. And second, also the point is that there are data privacy, or there are how much to sort of contextualize things and how to communicate, and at the same time, where is the line is drawn from regulatory point of view as well as from customer convenience and customer sort of engagement point of view, right? So I think the topic is pretty powerful. Let's try to make the best use of this topic in terms of getting the value of hyper personalization using the basically AI and big data or the other technologies which are peripheral to this, right? So with this, I'll probably use the liberty to run the panel in a way that probably just have some snippets or bites from you talking about hyper personalization. What do you see hyper personalization, role of hyper personalization in the consumer engagement journey, what you are seeing in your own companies, etc. And then we go into the use cases a little bit more deeper with your own experiences or the experiences you might be seeing in the industry generally. And then we talk about the technology. How does technology support it, right? How does technology make? So I hope with this three sort of tracks, we should be able to cover the entire spectrum. And we have probably about 45-50 minutes in our hand. Let's see how we can use it in the best possible manner, right? So maybe let me start with Anil. Anil, would you like to throw some light or your ideas about hyper personalization and how it is being used in the industry context, especially in the BFSI today, and what customers like, what customers don't like, or if we talk about hyper personalization, how can we benefit from it, right? So maybe it's a loaded question because I'm just trying to cover as much as with your thoughts, and then I think maybe we'll have other panelists also jumping in and talking about their ideas on this. Please.
I think this personalization is really important both from a customer point of view and also from the company point of view. So, I will give a very simple use case in our industry. Let's say a customer coming to us, and if you show just 10 different options, he might get more confusion and the decision taking might get hampered. If we have a right level of synergy built, which say that customer coming from this variety, probably he would looking for this. For example, one very high level. Let's say if a customer having a high credit card balance and he's paying a high interest or overdue amount on the credit card, maybe he might be a balance transfer product might be a good fit for him. So maybe that product should come as an outlier and the rest of them should be behind the scene. Similarly, somebody, let's say, not having any card, and for that maybe giving an option for, in our case, a salary card is probably a good option so that he can do a smaller transaction as well using the card. And similarly, if somebody is exploring a lot around the education or the skill upgradation, might be something buy on the EMI product where he can have a zero cost financing for any education products. So if we provide those information upfront, it's become easier for him to decision making rather than showing the entire umbrella. On the other side, it's in the company advantage since it reduces your CAC, since you are helping make a customer decision that may actually converting. And second thing is also making the operational more efficient. You have right data so that you know what to communicate, what not to communicate, and it's become a little bit more direct in nature. And obviously keeping all this is definitely personal data and security is top priority while you're doing all these things. And most of the time you can do everything without compromising on any of these things.
Great, Anil. I think good starting point. So Shrivas, let me bring you in. I know, in fact, yesterday we were getting introduced and I just missed out a point that, I did have a lot of interactions with you when you were in Kotak Securities. Yeah. And maybe you are in a new avatar. So I just missed out tracking the career part. And, I didn't realize that you are with Spice Money and managing, being a CEO role, right? So you have a fairly wide spectrum you have worked in the wealth management, broking, securities, and now you are into a fintech, which claims to be on the rural fintech or the fintech, which is fulfilling the rural end of the game. And it's not only a claim, I think you guys are doing a lot of work in that space, right? So what's your thought about the hyper personalization? Because you are dealing with a totally different kind of customer. And if you probably compare also, like in securities, you are dealing with the customers which were like semi-urban to urban, fairly literate people because they know they are playing with the money. Whereas in the spice money, you basically are dealing with the people who are in a different end of the pyramid, and they are obviously looking forward to engage on the money front, but it's more that they are on the receiving side of it, right? So, Srivas, your points of view on that, yeah.
Yeah. So the way we look upon the hyper personalization, we are into B2B, B2C model, and when you talk about hyper personalization and in context personalization or in context communication, you need to put the design thinking hat first before you stitch the thread. And when you put the design thinking hat, what comes is the personification with which you're going to communicate and deal with. So when you largely look at any organization in the communication, there are three large constituents who comes as in the persona. One is your distribution model, the distributors who are connected to your end customers. In some cases, it's directly your B2C model, you're connected to end customers, right? And then you've got your employee who becomes a preliminary interface between your distributors and customers as well. So when you create this kind of a model of hyper personalization and where a design thinking had, you need to understand what is relevant to those particular segment, like the choice and the capability of each of those merchants whom we deal with. Not only differs because it's a tier 3 and tier 4 location, but it differs from each statewide also, which means one size does not fit all. The method of communication, the method of selling, and the preferences of choice of end customers and the interfaces between the merchants to those customers differs from location. For example, we are deep rooted right now in 9 locations in North. It's most of the North Belt which are there, but the expectations of the product and the consumption of the end consumers and the pitch that those merchants do through our platforms to them is significantly different when it goes for West and South. So what does this give as an input for us in hyper personalization and localization is you need to have your entire app model, web model, or your ecosystem speaking the language which the distribution model wants to speak to your end customer. And you need to relevant and position yourself on those product and communication which your end customer wants from you. Just to give a simple example, you don't have to complex really things. Usually what happens as a mistake in the organization across Bharat is we want to sell what we want to sell, and we want to see what we want to sell, and we want to see our distribution to sell what we want to sell. That's the biggest mistake that we're doing. So if you want to really hit the effectiveness in hyper personalization, you need to really have a lot of interactivity with your end customers or your distribution model. And the distributors are the right guys because they are connected at the ground level to their customers. They understand their pulse and they help you to design your product and delivery the way they look at it. And when it comes for communication with your distribution, the Pareto's principle is something which everyone applies. Even the local merchant, kirana store, whether it is 250 square feet shop or a 500 fire quid shop or a big corporate house, right? So everyone wants to put 20% of their efforts and get 80% of the result. So that is what you need to really find what strikes the chord with your distribution model and the end customer. And that's what you need to deliver, whether it is a product, whether it is a communication or personalization.
Sure. I think wonderful, Srivas. I think great thoughts on this. So, Avik, let me come to you, and because you have been in the most of the brands which are focusing on large volume, but yes, mix of customers at a large scale. So, what's your thought? I mean, any specific use cases you see from consumer banking point of view or a digital lending point of view, where the hyper personalization becomes very relevant, and that's where it makes all the difference between your sales revenue and your growth. So how do you actually create the hyper personalization, and how does it impact the business?
Sure, Sachin. So definitely, when it comes to the hyper personalization, it definitely creates a huge difference in the services and the products that we offer to our customers, be it be it payments or be it lending, but more specifically, yes, lending. Lending as a product is very challenging, being that you are actually asking a customer to sort of take a service or product from you for which he has to pay for a long period of time, and And a customer would only do that when you are able to sort of leave a mark somewhere with him or her. Mostly organizations focus on understanding whether you want to give out personal loans, you want to give out car loans and others. But specifically in the consumer bank, consumer lending space, especially, I'm not talking about any of the secured. I'm talking about totally the unsecured products. It happens that you, for example, you go to some place, you visit somewhere, which is typically a very large shopping mall or something. You need a consumer durable loan. Now, what is it that we already have these data available with the customer? So now what we do when it comes to hyper personalization is that we typically use these data to actually get insights as to what is it that the customer is looking at, where is he going, what are the different tastes and preferences that he has, and maybe according to that we can model our approach, our communication, that we are the way in which we are communicating with the customer, our emails, our alerts, our SMSs, and also get an understanding of the channels. Typically there's a lot of ways in which a customer deals with the bank or with an organization. There are multiple channels, but we know from the data that which channel is he or she most active on, and what is it and how to reach it. And trust me, it makes all the difference. It really does make all the difference. uh, and that is where I think data can be used in order to sort of make a more personalized offering to the customer. But however, this is one part. The second and the most important part, which I think, is that also understanding how we can use the data to understand what are the customers' privacy concerns, and also the how to give a privacy experience to the customer. So while we reach out to the customer every time with a to cross sell products, to sort of understand what is his needs, to keep in touch, we also need to be very well aware that whether the customer wants to be connected, maybe what is the time to connect, whether he wants to be connected at all or not. So these is something that we generally do not focus on, but I think we are slowly moving towards that, towards those times when we have to take these factors into account. And this will bring a new data privacy and customer privacy will bring a new it will give a new meaning to the word of personalization.
Great. I think thanks, Avik. Thanks. So let me just pull in Primanshu. Let me take a little bit detour from lending, financial services to insurance a little bit. And so Primanshu represents insurance, and that's a differentiated offering of the BFSI segment. And Primanshu, I mean, I've been personally customer of CoverFox and I have experienced personalization or hyper personalization or whichever way it would have been done. But now that you are wearing a different hat, so let me understand from insurance perspective. And it's a tough sale, right? Insurance is a push product, unless you are motor insurance, which you are from a regulatory perspective, you need to have it. Otherwise, everything is else basically a customer's choice. And customers generally don't like to be sort of over communicated, right? So how do you manage that in insurance business compared to vis-a-vis others? And when you talk about hyper personalization, what are the sort of typical do's and don'ts which you generally follow to basically see that customer, one side we are communicating with the customer, we are using the standard stuff wherein customer retention is better, customer experience is better, sales is improved, cost of marketing is low, etc., etc. But on the other side, we don't end up sort of being on the wrong side of the customer, and we mess up with all these parameters what we mentioned, right? So how do you strike that balance in the hyper personalization? Yeah.
Sure. No, great. I think it's a great topic. See, what at least the way we handle things here is, we follow a model called, acquisition, engagement, revenue, then delta revenue, right? Basically, meaning first you need to take a user through a journey, right? And I think where our nation is at this point of time, I think till a couple of years, India was just a cheap DAU, MAU kind of a country, right? Wherein everybody will come acquire customers, but nobody had put their hats around how do you convert people better, and which is what I think the larger startup world is experiencing at this point of time, with the world asking us, things like, where is the revenue, right? What percentage of, you have a 1 billion population, but how many people are actually buying products and those kind of things, right? So at least for the way at Paytm and at CoverFox, we looked at hyper localization was, see, hyper localization is another way of saying how to utilize the data better, right? Because without data you can't hyper localize. That's one thing, right? Two, I think somebody sometime back mentioned, right, that data privacy, I think that's becoming super critical, right? And I can't even tell you the amount of money we are spending just to ensure that data privacy is taken care of. It's huge. It's a huge cost, right? Because the world has just changed. The world has changed. People are now they've started valuing their own data. Earlier it was, if you ask somebody for a phone number, he was like, okay, what will you do with my phone number? But times have changed now. It's drastically. In Indian context, I think hyper localization with a data backend is obviously the way to go, because see, Indians are very emotional people, right? Indians are very emotional people. They react to one-on-one, and that's why you'll see a lot of market is still off. I think hyper localization can provide a very unique and personalized experience, which appeals to emotions of people, right? And that's what we have, and which also means that once you move from a cohort of 1 billion people to a cohort of 1, right? The assumption is that because you are giving a more personalized experience wherein you're tapping into the emotion of the user, you'll be able to convert better. Right? So what we do in insurance is we understand what is the concern of the user, right? And which basically means understanding why is he not buying insurance, right? So if the issue is trust, then you bring that design thinking your product, and you say, I will be the most trustworthy platform. I'll be very transparent. I will specifically go through all documents and point out what's in the insurance policy, what's not in the insurance policy. We have also, through data, realized that there are about 30-40 life points in which people buy insurance, and hyperlocalization helps us identify those points and say what insurance product to pitch to the guy. For example, if you go to a 25-year-old guy, right, who's possibly still shopping for denims on Myntra and Flipkart, if you go and tell him you should buy a life insurance policy, your conversions are going to be very, very low, right? Because we know that in India people start buying life insurance once they get married, or they'll start getting more conscious about health once they hit mid-30s, right? So we have created a model wherein we said we are not going to offer all products to everybody, and we are going to decide what product to pitch to which guy at what point of time. So that's in short, at least the way we are looking at hyperlocalization.
Great, Pramashu. No, I think that's wonderful. I think it's a very different perspective, and coming from you, latest CoverFox and Paytm, very innovative companies like others, but in a differentiated area. So that's something very, very interesting to get started with discussion. So Ishwaraj, you are taking care of the technology side. So let me now jump to the technology. As we heard the views from other panelists that there is hyper personalization is a very important aspect to communicate right, maintain the regulatory aspects of it or customer privacy aspect of it. Also look at the segment of one that we are talking about 1 billion people, but then we got to communicate with everyone for what they need or what they desire to have rather than what we want to sell as a product, right? So from technology perspective, and I think big data, AI, or maybe other sort of technologies which are helping, how do you basically look at it, and where are you working on, or have you experienced some of the technologies which are helpful in basically meeting those business requirements or business expectations we just heard from various other panelists? So maybe quick point of view from you on that.
Sure. No, thanks, Sachin. That's was great to hear from everybody on their thoughts on hyper personalization. And personally, for me, the way something I really associate it is something what Jeff Bezos said back in the day, in the sense that if you have 1 billion customers on your platform, you need to have 1 billion different stores as well, because everybody has their own needs and wants and aspirations and lifestyle patterns, which you need to figure out, and then have structured our offerings accordingly. Now, at the end of the day, we are a financial services platform. We are not a lifestyle platform, and just like for a customer to come onto our platform is a strong expression of interest, in the sense that people would not download a lending app just to check out that app. It is a strong expression of interest in the sense that there is some credit requirement somewhere. Now, whether the customer is eligible for the kind of services we offer or not is a completely different story. But there is an expression of interest happening right there. Now, at the end of the day, the reason why somebody would come to a fintech company's platform is also for the differentiated user experience they promise. And a differentiated user experience also means that there should not be a one-size-fits-all model for everything, whether it be the products that you're trying to offer or the kind of user experience that the product encounters when they complete your journey. And if I would take the liberty of sounding a bit macro level, like you have all this talk about startup claiming to build for Bharat, which is absolutely right way to go about it. But we have to, whatever version of Bharat we are building for, you need to know that very, very well, and know that what are the customers exactly like, what are their buying patterns like, what are the spending patterns like, what are their lifestyle behaviors like, whatever you can access with explicit in terms of data that the users are comfortable giving, as well as some things that you really do need. Whatever you can access should be used in a way to in the best way possible to personalize the journey for every customer in the best way possible. Like you basically make the segment of one over there, and as Primanshu, Anil very well mentioned, that at this point of time when the customers have actually come onto your platform, then basis whatever data you already have, as well as data that you capture as and when they actually go through your journey, you try to actually be very dynamic in the sense that, okay, now what more do I know about this customer? What might he be requiring from me? What kind of credit requirement does the customer have? And just to say, for example, if the customer is, say, a subprime customer coming in onto your platform, and you know that the customer has a credit card because he is subprime, but he also has, say, a salary account in an HDFC bank, and that's why HDFC's bank has extended him a very low limit credit card out there, which he has obviously maxed out all the time. Then you go in and say that, hey, look, according to our parameters, you might be a very you are a very creditworthy guy. So this is this differentiated aspirational credit card offering that we have for you, and somebody might be very willing to take that because we know now that the customer spends very regularly on credit using credit cards, want to get into this loyalty program kind of a thing, but has a very low limit and is subprime, so that the bank would not give him a high limit out there. And if you try to push him a personal loan of 3 lakhs out there, that might not cut it, because that was not his requirement at the end of the day. So knowing what product to pitch to whom at what point of time in the journey, because credit is again a very time-based product. Not everybody needs money at all points of time. So even when people are doing marketing out there, we need to be telling the marketing teams that, okay, hey, look, these are the customers in our customer base who need this product or might need this product at this time of the month. So you go ahead and pitch these products to them to make it more differentiated for them. Because only then people feel that, okay, yes, this is a differentiated experience than what they would normally get at other platforms, and they would associate with that. And as Primanshu mentioned, then it is only then that you actually tap into the emotional connect that, yes, I am getting what I actually came in for, instead of just being listed down a list of things that you offer and having me to actually go through all the details and choose among what works best for me. That builds a trust as well, because now you said, okay, we know that what is your lifestyle requirement like. We will also make sure we have also given you an explicit declaration of whatever data sets that we access from you, and we'll also tell you that, okay, for this product, these are the things that we'll require from you, and we are a trustworthy platform out there, and we have designed it in a way that customers believe that we are a trustworthy platform. So in the end, I would only say that no matter whatever the niche that you are servicing, whether it's a broad super app or an app actually targeting a small segment of the population, using whatever data you have to know about the customer real time at that point of time, and personalizing not just your app journey, but the product that you want to pitch and when do you want to pitch that becomes fundamentally very, very important. And that's probably what I would like to say on that.
Sure, Yashraj. Sure. Thank you. No, I think that was quite a detailed analysis of basically how do you look at it, these opportunities, and especially your example on credit card, and again line of credit card on top of it. I think that was very wonderful, because I think there's still a huge gap in that segment. I think So Avik, I know that you have to jump off for a critical meeting with your MD4. So do you have a few minutes? Then maybe just one quick question to you that, we are talking about basically hyper-personalization in the context of mostly the companies, what they are doing. But then there is a lot of industry convergence happening, right? So the data coming, there are, and we talk about embedded finance, we talk about, all this is happening wherein finance is being provided at every touch point, right? Even I've seen you go to a saloon, you have a sticker of a particular provider that you can get your haircut done or hair color done.
Right.
You're paying 0% EMIs, right? So up to that level we have reached. Or you go to a spa, you go to anywhere practically. Like food is anyway, buy now pay later for a long time now, thanks to Jiten and team from PayU or Lazy Pay. But so just quick question to you in 2 minutes: how do we stitch together this hyper personalization using the other surrogate data, and keeping in view also the checks and balances of the regulatory aspects and the data privacy aspects? Very straightforward question. The answer is long, but you can give it as much as possible within a given time.
Sure. I will just try to keep it short and relevant. So I think, as you said, that we have a lot of surrogate data available, definitely. But the question is that how are we actually, number one, getting the data? How are we collecting that data? So I think given the data privacy framework and given the current regulatory framework, and also what's coming up, what's been in the news, what's been as a discussion point with the regulators, we will see that in order to get an access to all of these data, you actually need consent. Now, I think consent is something that we have to understand how we navigate the consent, the area of consent, whether it's a one-time consent, whether it's a consent that you need every time, or whether it's a consent that you can give as a disclaimer. It's like that. Once you have this data, then you have to understand how you can use these data in order to get very insights from it. We have, all of us, I think most organizations nowadays have a lot of heavy technology at the end, be it machine learning, be it AI based algorithms, be it various data analytics tools, in order to create a persona of the customer, and also create a model of what the customer and how the customer can be, and what are the products and services which may be personalized for him. So I think the stitching would have to be done accordingly, keeping in mind that what is it that the customer would want, what is it that I can fit in, and what is it that the laws of land would allow me to do. But definitely, at the end of the day, once we are talking about about providing services and products to the customer, I think the experience is the center of it. So anything that we do, we have to keep in mind the customer experience when we are building around it.
Great. Thank you, Avik. Thank you. So jumping on this to Anil. Anil, let's go into technology. I mean, you are technologists, you have worked on technology for a long time, and you have worked with the big banks, and you are now working with the startups and fintechs. So what we are seeing is that in last, say, maybe 5 to 10 years, there has been change in the technology on one side, right? So big data has come in, data lakes are there, AI has become a lot more powerful, more predictable, I must say, right? Or maybe let's say it is improving as the day goes by, right? On the other side, the consumer's behavior is changing, expectations are changing, products are changing. What Early Salary is doing today, like we understand about 5 years you have been doing this. So in this 5-year journey, one side the technologies would have changed, second is customer expectations have changed, and third is the products itself have changed, right? Yes. How you are able to marry all this together as a technologist? How do you meet the demands of the business to marry that, all this will go hand in hand, so that we can engineer the hyper personalization, which is, on the backbone of, let's say, big data, AI, or any other sort of technologies around that?
Yeah, I think the good part is that AI and big data, all this technology are first of all very matured, and now it become a commodity. So maybe 10 years back, it was up in the air, and selected set of segment were using it properly. But now I think every company uses it, and probably in a very great detail it uses it. So the technology become probably most easier to use, and that's given a lot of power to understand the user better. I will give you a very, very simple example. So let's say, what are the various means users connect to us? They connect to us via our app. So they come to our app, they spend some time looking at various different sections. They come to our web. They sometimes call our customer care. Then they chat with us. They send an email. So we have a lot of data points for any product. Basically, it has to be for the customer, and for you to know what is the right product, you need to know what customer is looking for. So this data itself give a lot of insight. So if you consider all different channel of data, you will have a terabyte of data flowing, right? The important that how effectively we are able to analyze it. So right now there are all tools and technology are available, and it's like no rocket science, everyone can do it. And the more you analyze, more you get to know what is the user sentiment, what you are looking for, what are the challenges he's facing. Can we make a journey, or can we give him a product for which absolutely zero human touch for the entire life of the customer? If a customer stay with me for, let's say, 4 or 5 years, can he not need to connect even for a single point of time, having any any connection with a human? That means all the information he needs should be available in the right form and in very crisp form. So today, I think while we do all these analysis for, let's say, voice recognition, voice analytics, then with the chat data analysis, we find a lot of difference input, which was otherwise it was not possible to do with a manual review and things like that. So I think this is something really helping us make customer experience better, make our company better, since we are focusing on the right thing and we are becoming more and more efficient.
Thank you. I think that's quite a bit of insight. So Shrivats, we discussed that your focus basically Spice Money is towards rural population, or let's say bottom of the pyramid, or let's say tier 4, tier 5, tier 3 to tier 5, right? Now the question I have is that when we talk about hyper personalization and use of the technology to engineer that, how would you do it? Because probably the smartphone population itself is still increasing, but it's not that it's everyone is using a smartphone in the rural economy segment. Second is that internet penetration is improved, so naturally it's becoming better, but people are still improving, and then the digital and financial literacy remains a question mark, right? Even if you have data, even if you have a smartphone, how do you make the best use of it? I mean, in terms of digital transactions. So when we talk about hyper personalization, obviously it's all about communicating customer for the right time, for the right purpose, and helping customer either do a transaction or solve the query of the customer or finding a right product, etc. So what's your experience in the rural or the tier 3 to tier 5 kind of segment? And again, from technology perspective, is Spice Money investing heavily into basically the big data and AI to use the technology, or is still you are looking at that what kind of use cases may emerge, and then you may decide to basically invest accordingly with some POCs, experiments, and some kind of a pilots?
Okay, so I'll answer this question in two portions. One is from the business side and the technology side, both of them. So from the business side perspective, what we must understand is the tier 3 to tier 4, tier 5 locations. The digital curve is yet to mature. It's in the stage of getting mature, which means smartphones penetrations, yes, there are dependencies, and that's the reason for next 3 to 5 years, you'll have a phygital model that will be existing in the ecosystem. And that's precisely why we have 5 lakh merchant base who are digitally assisting the end consumers. And also there is what we call as phygital model that is still existing and that will continue to exist. So does that mean that the end consumers are digitally native? No, some of them are self-adopters, some of them requires assistance, and that is where the distribution model really helps in, because these merchants whom we have acquired and who are there with us are the digital entrepreneurs. So you've got financial entrepreneurs, digital entrepreneurs, and you've got merchant base who are ready to adopt. So how do you define the digitization? The digitization of these merchants defines like anyone who is using a smartphone, which is 3,000 rupees, who can use this app and assist his customer to do the transaction. You can call him a digital savvy merchant. At the same time, this guy, if he uses a digital ecosystems for payments, swipe card, contactless payments, he falls into a digital category. The end consumer, when comes to the shop and gets interaction with this merchant over a period of time, when he consumes the services, he's using the phygital services, but he's now getting educated towards digitization. So today is a consumer who is requiring assistance. Tomorrow he'll become an evolved consumer, maybe another 3 years, 4 years down the line when he starts using. But it also depends upon the convenience that customer carries in his mind. If he continues to use smartphones but still wants an assistant, so be it. You should allow that, the way of working to go on. Now, to answer the technology question part of it, obviously you have no other choice but to invest heavily on technology, because what happens is, if you want to help your merchants to assist your end customers, you can't expect him to have the thinking of analytics, knowledge about his customers, slice and dice. So though mentally he has in his mind that who are his key customers visiting his shop, he doesn't know who is a profitable customer. At the same time, he doesn't know who is a customer whom he's interacting is really productive for. At the same time, he doesn't know what to cross-sell and upsell to that customer. And that is where his focus, if he's a Kirana shop, his focus of 80% remains a Kirana shop, and the digital ecosystem that he adopts at the most maximum is either the digital ecosystem of swipe, MATM, APS, cash withdrawal, or you go for additional train ticket booking and other things through an in-app journey. Now, how do you evolve him? The way you evolve is when you as an organization invest and you take the transaction data, you start creating a journey plan for the merchant and the merchant's customer. And that is where the personalization actually comes in. And that is where the localization also kicks in. So you become a guy in the back end with your technology capability and investment in big data. You create a journey plan, help him to assist his customer. And during the journey plan, you not only create his business lifecycle journey plan and engage with him to give the different products, but also create a journey plan to engage with his customers as well. And that's how you can have a multi-product facet coming to him. He adopts the information analytics. He adopts the recommendation engine coming to you, and his productivity and revenue share increases. And that's how you solve the ecosystem between business and technology put together.
I think that's wonderful. I didn't even think like that. Now that I think it's a great, insights for me, because I always thought of hyper personalization direct to consumer, but you talked about the merchants who are, so it's a B2B2C model, and where the hyper personalization for merchants itself is one of the big area, because merchants are the last mile for the end consumer. And especially in the tier 4 to tier 5 cities, wherein, like you said, it may take 2 to 3, 4 years for end consumers to become knowledgeable and do the self journey. So we are talking about assisted journeys, and we are giving all the tools or all the insights to basically the merchants or the point of contacts or customer service points, and basically helping them with the personalization, and then using that basically providing the services to the end consumer. I think that's a beautiful model. So Primanshu, let me come to you. I think insurance also has had a tremendous amount of the channel distribution challenges, as well as enablements, as we've seen. And insurance is one of the most, I would say, getting disrupted or happening industry at this moment because of various reasons. I mean, one side, regulations are changing frequently. Second, healthcare has become a lot more important topic for everyone, right? And people are getting really concerned, and they are at least ready to look at insurance as one of the product which earlier probably they haven't even thought about, right? So as we see that new products have come, EPOS is there, or maybe there are new products are being coming. What do you see? You also have a similar model wherein hyper personalization is not limited to the end consumer; it is also to the channel or distribution partners what you have, and you are utilizing them, or agents, or basically your own sales force, or is it something which is you are looking at primarily to the end consumer? And second is probably add-on question, just a little bit, is that from technology perspective, can you see a huge play of technology and it's already playing out, or is it something which you are observing it and then the investments will start as you understand the use cases better? Yeah, please.
Sure. Great. So one, see the distribution of financial service in India is very primitive, right? There are, at least in my mind, there is no two thoughts about it, right? So which means that the existing modes of distribution of insurance specifically are all going to be disrupted, whether it's selling insurance through banks, whether it's selling insurance to dealer networks, through feet on street. My personal belief is it's a matter of time. They will all get disrupted because they're inefficient. They lead to mis-selling. They're not good for the user at the end of the day, right? So see the way we are looking at it, and we had Vijay, a couple of us had a deep thought on how do we want to approach insurance, and we said if we are doing it the way others do it, then we are betting against the future. So what is the future? The future is that call centers are going to die. Okay, the future is feet on street is not scalable, right? The largest broker in India, right, Policybazaar, done about 12 years, 13 years into existence. Now knows that, and we know that model. We know that 12,000 people on call center kind of a model. It's struggling for growth, still not profitable, right? So our bet is purely by saying that we will, from a distribution perspective, go completely DIY. We will say, okay, we might. So what we know is that we are not late in the market. We are either early or just in time. And if it's early, which means that we need capital and patience, which we have at this point of time. So if you want to scale, disrupt the distribution that we have at this point of time, it only has to be done through technology, right? Let me put this way: about 85% of the cost in the team that I run is technology. It's all product and tech people, right? So we are putting a lot of resources, a lot of time and bandwidth into building a technology-led ecosystem. Other thing we are also doing is how do we empower the 2 crore merchants that Paytm has, right? In terms of empowering them to sell insurance, and that is also going to happen through technology as well. So we are only going to do a app-led kind of a model with them, right? Wherein we are saying, we will offer a plethora of services to the merchant and see if hyper locally they want to be resellers or extend, both from a sales and service perspective. They can also, a shopkeeper can become a service point, right? So we are basically currently in the process of building products for it, but principally agree, there is, it's, and I think I just heard somebody say, right, there are channels which are going to be omnipresent, both online and offline. But my bet is very different. It's always, and a lot of us are startup guys here, it's always a question between hedge and bet, right? People who hedge never win, right? So you'll have to pick one by saying, I will go after this market or that market. And our bet is purely on going digital. Sooner or later it will go there, purely on using technology to leverage it.
Okay, that's really good, Primanshu. I think, and that's what we expect from market leader like Paytm, right? And you being there, having seen the other side of it, or other startup you already worked and led. So absolutely, I think looking forward
just to add, right? We are all colleagues here. It's going to be an extremely painful journey. It's not easy. Well, because at the end of the day, you know that you can put a young guy or a guy on a call center, and he'll be able to convert sales. You know that because it happens. But so it requires a capital, patience, a lot of guts to just say that I'm going to leave revenue on the table, right?
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, there's always a decision between what is low hanging fruit and what is something a long term benefit. And I do agree with you that most of the companies have tried low hanging fruits, but then they have also paid a price of today. If you see the large insurance companies, they have thousands of people. They have models. They are totally dependent on banker relationships, and it is becoming very painful for them also, because practically then they almost lose almost everything what they earn in a year one. Right. So they don't have any control. So I think it's too much dependent on somebody. So I think it's always, if you have to build your own channels, etc., it does take time, and there is no shortcut to it that quickly I get 4 policies today and then I will survive. I think, and then somebody has to do it, right? So good that you are doing, and I'm sure that all the industry leaders here are doing similar things in their own space. So that's pretty interesting. So last question to Yashraj. I know we are running against time, but I think it has been a wonderful conversation. So much of nuggets of knowledge gained in this. Probably I take 1 month of my consulting assignment to talk to people and get it. So, very, very good for at least me personally. So Yashraj, what's in your industry, how you are seeing it? Similar question, because you are again in a high growth, high penetration, and millions of customers coming in. What are you doing? I mean, it's completely digital, pumping in a lot of tech behind it, which is big data, AI, for hyper personalization, and looking at how do you disrupt the market, or you are taking a mid path that, okay, let me just be there, keep trying it, and also keep gaining some business in the process. And maybe it will take 2 to 3 years to basically customer behavior to change, right? So what exactly is your thought process on this? You are on mute. You can unmute yourself, please.
I'm sorry about sorry. Yeah, thanks, Sachin. And I completely agree with what Primanshu just said on this point, in the sense that we firstly are catering to the millennial population in tier 1 and tier 2 cities, and the idea was to go completely as a digital only platform at the end of the day. So till that, we do not have an inbound call center. Like, customer cannot actually make calls to Cashy and actually ask about the status of the loans, because we feel that the customer segment that we are catering to are digitally savvy enough to complete processes and get guidance, provided that we are giving inputs. Because last time I just mentioned that we are making sure that through personalization of the user journey at all points of time, at every single screen, as well as in terms of what product to pitch, we are gleaning enough information to the customers that we are able to help them enough to apply for loan. And there is no specific need of going physical with the kind of verification that we are doing. There is no manual touch point on the customers, in the sense that there has never been teams of people actually visiting the customer for collecting documents or kind of collecting money, stuff like that. Processes that banks are generally following a lot, but in our case, it's always been a completely digital process. What does happen, however, is that, and this is something that I think we'll be able to also kind of get done with in the next couple of 2 to 3 years, is that when it comes to, if I were to specifically mention about what physical process we do, like there are some customers who still, as Shrivatsa mentioned, that even if they have a smartphone, their smartphones, savvy smartphone users still would prefer a certain amount of nudging, certain amount of hand holding in the application. So that is somehow sometimes done as an outbound calling process, but that is pretty much it. We are a digital first company. We want to be a digital first company, making sure that all the insights gleaned from the customers through the data sets they provide to us, obviously in accordance with data privacy laws and with explicit user consent, as well as what we get to know about customer behavior during the course of their interaction with us, during the course of their relationship with us. Having given them 7 or 8 credit products over time, we now know enough about how a customer's life cycle is, and we think that we are technologically capable enough to actually have a user experience and a user journey, as well as products that customers themselves would be comfortable choosing. And we are also sure that we would be able to offer products that actually cater to a customer's diverse needs at any point of time, that we are there to provide you with credit for whatever you need, whenever you need it. And that is essentially our philosophy with hyper personalization, with actually having a digital first journey.
Fantastic. So just to wrap up, I'll take a minute and a half extra and do a quick rapid fire round. Okay. So I know it's going to be tough because, but don't worry, it's no personal questions. We are still on the hyper personalization. Okay. So I will see basically 3 questions to all of you, and you can rank them 1, 2, 3 in terms of hyper personalization. What do you see the top priority, number 1, 2, 3? I mean, to be very frank, some of you may say that all 3 are equal, but that's fine. But still, you will have to, put it 1, 2, and 3, right? So let's figure it out. That how do we do that, right? So benefits of hyper personalization in, say, B2C space, which we are all operating, right? First, I'm saying that increased sales or revenue. Okay. Second is reduction in the customer acquisition cost or servicing cost, right? And third is basically improve customer satisfaction or the retention. So we are talking about 3 things. One is revenue or sales increase. Second is reduction in the cost of acquisition or servicing. And third is basically improving the customer delight or customer retention or NPS or whatever you call it. In 1, 2, 3, if you can give me your ranking in terms of using all the technology when you think, I'm sure you think all 3 alike, but just want to have a little bit of a preferential treatment what you give to these of them. So Yashraj, you said the last point. Maybe I'll start with you itself to start
Sure.
this one, right?
Sure.
So what's your thought?
No, definitely, that's a very interesting question, Sachin, and I would probably go it in the order of 3, 1, and 2, in the sense that the first priority is to actually have the best customer experience out there and increase customer satisfaction. That in a way has an implicit virtuous cycle of increasing your sales and revenues. That comes number 1. That comes number 2, and then obviously with an increased sales and revenue with the same technology platform that you have actually put in money into by having a better user experience, you will have a reduced CAC over time. So for me, it's 1 is having the best user experience out there, then using that to actually increase sales and revenue, and number 3 is reduce CAC. Okay,
Premanshu, your bets.
I'll just copy what Yashraj said. For me, it's also 3, 1, 2.
Okay.
So if you need to give an experience, I personally don't think a CAC is going to drastically reduce by hyper localization. I think you might have to incur more cost as well. but it's at some point of time might get offset by renewable business, repeat business kind of a thing. So yeah, so for me it's also 3-1-2.
Great. And Srivas, from you?
Yeah, the answer is same, I think, across industry, because customer satisfaction and retention helps for increasing sales and reducing cost. It goes with your distribution network as well. You need to keep them satisfied and retain.
Which looks like there's a paper which the answers are already leaked.
We are living this. This is, I think, 80% of us are in that area.
It's obvious. Anil, any difference of opinion, or you?
No, same answer.
Great. So I think one good thing is that in panel we actually agreed for same thing, and all companies from different background, different profile of people, different. But I think we all agree that customer satisfaction or retention is the number one, and then comes basically increasing the revenue, and then plowing back that revenue for acquisition. And acquisition cost may or may not reduce, but at least we reduce bombarding the customers with what they don't need, and probably that could be the reduction in the cost. So Primanshu, just to add on that, I was not intending to say that it will be like we will spend less on marketing and we'll acquire more customers. But what happens, the lot of budget of marketing was, it's like only 1% or 2% communication what you send gets opened, right? Or maybe a couple of percent. So at least if we become more hyper personalized, we are actually getting a better click-through rate or better customer response, and probably we'll reduce spend on the marketing which we give out to all the companies to blast our communication all over the place, or the big tech companies globally, whatever we do, right? So with this, I think wonderful talking to all of you. Thank you so much for being there, having an engaging discussion, and look forward to being in touch with all of you, and handing it over back to Jeevan and Sanya. In case there are any questions from audience, we'll be happy to answer quickly. Otherwise, please let us know what is the next step, and we can